So, your first coaching session with a new client follows 4 simple steps. You check in, you set the focus, you explore the real theme, and you close with a clear commitment. That's the whole shape of a strong first session, and once you have it, you stop dreading that blank hour before the call. I used to sit there before every new client meeting, quietly panicking about what I was actually going to fill 60 minutes with. So I built a structure I could trust, and it changed everything. In this video, I'll walk you through the exact 4-step framework I use for a first session, how long each part should take, and the one thing most coaches rush past that quietly decides whether that client comes back for a second session. So here's the plan. First, the 4 steps in order. Then, how this shifts when you're meeting a brand new client for the very first time. And near the end, the part that matters more than any clever question you could ask. Let me start with step 1, because this is where the whole session either lands or drifts. Step 1 is the check-in. Every session opens with a moment where your client arrives and actually gets present. This is not small talk. It's an intentional landing, a way to help your client shift from wherever they just were into this conversation with you. I like to open with something simple like, "How are you showing up today?" or "What's your energy like right now?" That one question does more than you think. Now here's where the check-in gets tricky, and it's the mistake I made for my first year of coaching. The check-in wants to eat your whole session. You ask how someone is doing, and 40 minutes later, you're still there, nodding, while the real work never starts. So you have to hold the container gently. When a client has a lot to unload, I'll say, "I want to make sure we have time to really dig in today, so let's hold some of this for our main focus." That keeps the warmth without losing the hour. For a first session, keep this part light and welcoming. You're not reviewing old action steps yet, because there are none. Instead, you're helping a nervous new client feel at ease, and you're explaining what coaching actually is and is not. Budget around 5 to 8 minutes here, a little longer than usual, because a first session carries extra ground, so that's the check-in. But arriving is not the same as knowing what you're working on. Which brings us to step 2. Step 2 is setting the focus. This is where you and your client agree on what this session is actually for. And I want to be really clear about this part because it's the step most coaches assume they can skip. Don't assume you already know what they need. I have Paperbell send every new client a short intake form before we meet, but even when they have written something down, I still ask what's most alive for them right now. My favorite question here is, what would make this hour feel like time really well spent? For a first session, this step goes a layer deeper. You're not just setting today's focus, you're understanding their bigger goals, what they want from the whole coaching relationship, not just this one call. That context shapes every session that follows, so it's worth the time. Once you land on a focus, name it out loud. Say something like, "So we're spending today on this. Is that right?" That one sentence prevents the quiet drift that happens when a coach and client are secretly working on 2 different things. So now you have your client present and you both know the focus. That was the setup. Now here's where the actual coaching happens and where most of your time goes. Step 3 is exploring the theme. This is the heart of the session. This is where you ask the deep questions, help your client see their situation from new angles, and surface what's really going on underneath the surface problem. This is where limiting beliefs get named and assumptions get challenged. On a first session, this phase is also where trust gets built, because your client is finding out what it feels like to be really listened to. So, a few tools work beautifully here. The first is open-ended questions, things like, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?" or "What's the fear underneath that?" The second is reflection, where you feed back what you're hearing in your own words so your client hears themselves differently. And the third tool is silence. Don't be afraid to let a good question just sit there Some of the most important work happens in the pause after you stop talking, so resist the urge to fill it. On a 60-minute call, give this exploration phase around 30 minutes. On a 30-minute session, aim for about 15. Whatever your session length, exploration should always get the biggest slice because this is the part your client actually came for. So, here's a practical trick that saves me every time. Set a gentle reminder for about 10 minutes before the end. That reminder is your cue to start bridging out of exploration and into what comes next. Even if the conversation is still flowing, it's always better to close cleanly than to run over and rush the most important step of all. And that step is where I want to spend real time, because this is the one thing most coaches skip. Step 4 is the action plan and the close. Remember, at the start, when I promised there was one part that quietly decides whether your client books a second session? This is it. A coaching session without a clear close is just a nice conversation. The action plan is the thing that turns it into coaching. So this step has 2 pieces. The first piece is the commitment. You help your client decide what they're going to do between now and your next session. I use a simple flow borrowed from the coaching world. First, you brainstorm what they could do with no judgment. Then you notice what they actually want to do. Then they commit to what they'll do in their own words. The magic word there is commit. Not I'll try, not I should probably, but I will do this specific thing by this specific date. That specificity is what makes it real instead of just aspirational. The second piece is the close itself, and a strong close has 3 quick parts. First, let your client name their biggest takeaway. Ask, what's the biggest thing you're taking from today? And let them say it, because they'll own it far more deeply when the words are theirs. Second, confirm the commitment out loud, so you both remember exactly what they agreed to. And third, end on an encouraging beat. On a first session especially, I love to close with, you did real work today. It takes 5 seconds and it lands every single time. For a brand new client, keep that first commitment light. It might just be a short reflection or a journaling prompt rather than a big behavior change. The relationship is still young, so you start small and build from there. So that's the full arc for a first session. You check in and help them arrive. You set the focus and understand their bigger goals. You explore the theme and you close with a real commitment. Check in, set the focus, explore, close. Every time. Now let me quickly cover the part that trips people up, which is running all of this online. The good news is the 4 steps work exactly the same on video as they do in person. But a few things need a little extra care. Ask your client to keep their camera on when they can, because the body language you'd notice in a room is easy to miss on a screen. Leave a bit more space after your questions too, since audio lag makes silences feel longer, so count to 3 in your head before you jump in. So the other thing that makes virtual sessions smoother is simply being organized before the call. This is honestly why I run my whole practice on Paperbell. Those intake forms I mentioned go out automatically before every session, so my clients arrive already knowing what they want to focus on. It handles my scheduling with automatic time zone conversion, so I never have that awkward mix-up with a client in another country. And it keeps my payments and my client notes in one place, so I can actually focus on the coaching instead of the admin. After the session, send a brief recap with the action your client committed to. It can be a quick email or a note in their client portal, and it closes the loop so your client has something to look back on before you meet again. So here's what I want you to take away. The clever questions are not what make you a great coach on that first session. The structure is. When you know the arc of the conversation is already handled, you get to be fully present and your client feels it. They leave knowing exactly what shifted and exactly what they're doing next. And that's what makes them book the second session and the 10th. So go run your next first session with this framework, check in, set the focus, explore, and close with a real commitment. If you want the tool that handles the scheduling, the forms before each call, the payments, and the client notes so you can just coach, I use Paperbell, and you can try it for free. The link is in the description. Now go do great work.